Hello, I'm Edna Kane Williams, Executive Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at AARP. The time you are investing today to take the course, Becoming a More Inclusive Volunteer, is critical to our overall success. At AARP, we are working to uplift the voices and experiences of all people. As an AARP volunteer, we need your help to embed diversity into our advocacy, education, and outreach work. This training and others like it are examples of our commitment to the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the 50 plus. As we all work to fulfill AARP's mission to empower people to choose how they live as they age, we must remember that AARP's founder, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrus, saw the power of uniting diverse and inclusive voices to advocate for change. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is everyone's responsibility at AARP. Thank you for taking the time to take this training. It will help you grow your skills at becoming a more inclusive volunteer.
I'm Derek Young, and let's talk about the strategy before the strategy. Think about it. You are a person who has elected to serve AARP. You have elected to be more inclusive of your fellow volunteers and your community partners and everyone who can be supportive of the AARP mission in your city, in your town. Well, you and I both know that your volunteer work relies heavily on the people around you. Nothing gets done without people. No mission is advanced without people. Well, this concept of the strategy before the strategy is one that I hope you will use to have greater success with everything you do for AARP. Let's paint the picture. You and a group of, let's say, 5 to 7 people have a goal to increase visibility of AARP in your community. Let's just make it something simple like that. You do a brief survey with a certain group within your community to get a sense of how do people currently perceive AARP where you live. And you find out that out of every 10 people, 6 have a great understanding, 2 have a limited understanding, and the other 2 don't really know much about you at all. So your goal is to get that 6 number up to 8. See where we are? That's our goal, all right? That's our project. We're going to work over the next 12 months to do a variety of activities that help raise our visibility in our community. All right, you got that? All right, that's our project. That's our initiative. Now, please write this down. There are 2 strategies that should be put in place before you ever do a big initiative. There is the process strategy. That's your traditional strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, objectives, goals. That's that, right? Your process. How are we going to walk this out? What steps will we take to increase visibility? The more important strategy that people often ignore or leave out is your people strategy. What I'm suggesting to you is that you should always create a people strategy before you create your process strategy. Let me put it to you this way. How many times have you worked on a project, a large-scale project especially, where all the steps are laid out, all the things you're going to do, all the marvelous goals and objectives you're going to achieve are laid out, and then 3 months in, some person, some personality jacks it all up, breaks it all down, and you got to what? Start from scratch. You've been there. If you've been a volunteer long enough, you've been there, you've done that, and you don't want the t-shirt. Well, we want to try to prevent that by sharing today what I call the strategy before the strategy. So here's the reality. When we talk about becoming a more inclusive volunteer, this program fits beautifully with that concept. Because what we're going to suggest to you here is that if you will be more inclusive of people on the front end, you will increase the likelihood of success on the back end. Now, I'm going to offer you somewhat of a diagram, so I want you to stick with me. For me, I am what I call a realist. I know some people who are what I call idealists. Now, this is just a DY definition. This definition may not work for you, but it works for me. When I say an idealist, I believe idealists are people who start with how things should be and they work backwards. That's what I think of an idealist. Me, I'm a realist. I start with how people and things are and I work forward. Well, people strategy is what we say in St. Louis, show enough a people strategy because it's all about the real. The first thing I want to think about is I want to think about who are the people who have the greatest ability to help or hurt my project. Who are the people who have the greatest ability to help or hurt my project? I like to get maybe 12 people in mind. I don't want to get too many people because that'll become maybe a bit overwhelming. So who are the 12 people who are most significant to this project from a positive, helpful way or from a negative, destructive way? I write those names down. Next step. I use a little chart, a little grid. And this grid has 3 points. On the left is 4, meaning people that I know or believe are for what I'm doing. Doesn't matter what it is. But in this case, we're trying to increase visibility of our organization. Who's for that? In the middle of my little grid is people who are against it, meaning I know they're against it or I perceive that they are against it. All right, that's the midpoint on my little grid line. And at the right, so again, for it, against it, and on the right are people who are indifferent. Again, I know they're indifferent based on what I've seen them do and what I've heard them say, or I just have a gut feeling that they're indifferent. Now, I've been doing this a long time. Invariably, somebody will go, wait a minute, DY, whoa. Shouldn't indifference be in the middle? And my answer is no. Because, write this down. When you know someone is against your initiative, your program, your plan, they're doing you a favor. Because you know you need to create a strategy to address that. The people who scare me are the indifferent people, where I don't know if they're for it or not. I don't know if they're for me or not. That is why I want to think about them in my people strategy before I ever even start the process. Some of you are saying, DY, this is too much, man. I'm just trying to volunteer for AARP. I'm just trying to help people in my community. Listen. Hey, remember? My idealism says, hey, baby, I wish we could do that. But my reality says I have seen far too many good-hearted, good-natured volunteers take a lot of time, a lot of money, and basically flush it because they didn't deal with the people issues before they came up with all these great, wonderful ideas. So I feel you, but I'm giving you this from the perspective of someone who has worked with thousands of volunteers over the past 3 decades. So again, my second step is now I want to chart those 12 people in one of those 3 categories. Some people might be in the middle of for and against. Some people might be in the middle of against and indifferent, but I want to get an idea of where they are on that scale. Here's the next step. I want you to take for, against, and indifferent, and I want you to draw a line from left to right. All right? Now remember, we're plotting people as if on a graph. The next thing I want you to think about is the space above that line and the space below that line. Two variables. Above the line are people who have a lot of power, a lot of influence. Old school word from the 70s I like to use is a lot of juice. So you're going to plot someone's name above that line if they are that kind of individual in your community, in your town, as it relates to your project. Guess who goes below the line? The people you put below the line are people who don't have much power, influence, or juice. Now here's something that I know all of you know, but I want to add it. Sometimes we assume, underline that if you're taking notes, sometimes we assume that a person who has a high title has a lot of power, influence, and juice. But how many of you have been working and doing this stuff long enough to where you realize sometimes that that ain't the case? I have worked in organizations where administrative assistants have more power and influence and juice than some executives. You feel me? So what we're going to do with those 12 names is we're going to plot them on this graph. Let's make up a name. Let's say Alex is a county commissioner, and Alex is a person who has a lot of influence in your district where many of your AARP volunteers are. And boy, I tell you, if we could get Alex on board to speak positively about AARP, to give us access to the different groups and projects that he's responsible for, boy, would that drive our visibility. So, where does he sit? Alex loves AARP. Loves AARP. So that person is going to go where? That top left section of your grid. They're for it, and they have a lot of juice. Well, let's say there's Cynthia. And Cynthia is a television reporter in your community. And Cynthia had a bad experience with a former AARP employee years ago. But she's the #1 news figure in your community. And woo, it would be sweet if we could get her on the team. Well, she's got a lot of power. But right now, she's against you. You see what we're doing here? So again, you're going to do that with those 12 people. This is a way to be inclusive of everybody on your volunteer team because everybody has a perspective, an opinion. Some people will have more information than others. You get the point? So we build that chart. We now have a sense of where those top 12 people are. Again, we haven't even designed our strategy to do the thing yet. We hadn't even put one thing in place yet because we want to know who and where these key people are. Next step. Now that you see where those key 12 people are, now you work as a group to ask yourself, which relationships should we focus on and how should we leverage those relationships? Let's go back to Cynthia, the news anchor. It may be determined that she is so negative that even though she does have a great position in the community, we may not even try to involve her because we just don't think we can get her moving in our direction. But if you do think you can get her moving in your direction, obviously you leverage, listen closely, you leverage the relationships of other powerful people who might be able to influence Cynthia. You see how that works? So what it enables you to do from a pure time management standpoint is it enables you to focus on the relationships that you think will help you achieve your goal. In this case, increase your visibility score from a 6 to 8 out of 10 in the simplest way. You see, this notion of having the strategy before the strategy is simply about the old school term, getting your ducks in a row. It's finding out who's for you and against you. It's finding out who are the people we should focus on interacting with to help us achieve our project before we ever even design the project. See how that can help? You see how transformative that might be? Because you don't have a problem coming up with steps to achieve a project. You can do that in your sleep. But what we want to avoid in this process is we want to avoid you having to start from scratch, you having a bunch of problems, you having a bunch of slowdowns because in some ways you didn't involve the right people in the right way at the right time. Listen, I want to tell you something. I believe AARP is a phenomenal organization. Obviously, you feel the same way. The fact that you are taking time to watch this video, to build your knowledge, your skills, your confidence, much love to you for that. Just remember, it's all about the strategy before the strategy.